Dallas, Texas, 1987. Ron Woodruff has just been diagnosed with HIV and given 30 days to live. AZT, the only FDA-approved treatment, is making him sicker. So Ron does something illegal. He crosses the border into Mexico, buys experimental drugs not approved in the United States, and smuggles them back home. Then he starts selling them to other dying patients. He calls it the Dallas Buyers Club. When the government fails you, you build your own system. Ron Woodruff was an electrician and rodeo cowboy, an unlikely medical revolutionary. But AIDS had a way of turning ordinary people into activists. The FDA approval process could take years. Clinical trials had strict requirements. Dying patients didn't have years. So they formed buyers clubs, membership organizations that would legally purchase drugs from countries where they were already approved, then distribute them to members. Peptide T from Mexico, AL-721 from Israel, dextran sulfate from Japan. Compounds showing promise in early studies, but stuck in FDA bureaucracy. Were these drugs safe? Often no one really knew. But when your doctor says you have months to live, safety becomes relative. The Dallas Buyers Club wasn't alone. Similar organizations sprang up in New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles. They operated in legal gray zones. Not quite illegal, but definitely not authorized. The FDA raided some clubs, confiscating medications. This only intensified the conflict between AIDS activists and government regulators. ACT UP's message became even more urgent. Let us try experimental drugs. If we're dying anyway, give us the choice. Eventually, the pressure worked. In 1992, Congress passed laws allowing importation of medications for personal use under certain conditions. The buyers clubs had won a crucial victory. But Ron Woodruff's story has a complicated ending. He did live years beyond his 30-day prognosis, dying in 1992, about 7 years after his diagnosis. Did his experimental cocktail of drugs save him, or would he have survived anyway? We'll never know. What we do know is that desperate people, left with no options, created their own. While most scientists were racing to develop better HIV treatments, a small but vocal group was making a disturbing claim. HIV doesn't cause AIDS. The virus doesn't even exist. Meet Dr. Robert Wilner, a physician who became the face of HIV denialism. Wilner claimed AIDS was caused by drug use, poor nutrition, and the very medications designed to treat it. He called HIV theory the biggest medical hoax of the century. In 1993, at a press conference in Spain, Wilner did something shocking to prove his point. He took a needle, drew blood from an HIV-positive patient, and injected himself on camera. "I'm not going to get AIDS," he declared, "because HIV doesn't cause AIDS." Robert Wilner died in April 1995. The cause of death was listed as a heart attack, but the timing raised questions he never lived to answer. Wilner wasn't alone. A Berkeley professor named Peter Duesberg claimed HIV was a harmless passenger virus. A group called Rethinking AIDS published papers questioning the connection between HIV and immune collapse. The consequences of this denialism were deadly, not just for the deniers themselves, but for those they influenced. In South Africa, President Thabo Mbeki embraced HIV denialism in the early 2000s. His government delayed antiretroviral treatment programs, instead promoting nutrition and vitamins. Researchers later estimated this policy led to over 300,000 preventable deaths. Meanwhile, the scientific evidence was overwhelming. HIV had been isolated, sequenced, and photographed. It fulfilled Koch's postulates for proving a microorganism causes disease. Antiretroviral drugs that targeted HIV were extending lives. The virus was real. The disease was real, and the denialism was killing people. But even legitimate science had its dark sides. Remember the two scientists who discovered HIV in 1983? Their story took an ugly turn. Dr. Luc Montagnier at the Pasteur Institute in Paris isolated what he called LAV, lymphadenopathy-associated virus. Dr. Robert Gallo at the National Cancer Institute in the US isolated what he called HTLV3. They were the same virus. But here's where it gets messy. Montagnier's lab sent samples to Gallo's lab for comparison. Soon after, Gallo announced his discovery. The dispute became a full-blown international incident, with the French and American governments getting involved. Millions of dollars in patent rights for HIV testing were at stake. In 1987, Presidents Reagan and Chirac brokered a settlement. Both scientists would be credited as co-discoverers, and patent royalties would be shared. In 2008, the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine was awarded for the discovery of HIV. The recipients, Luc Montagnier and his colleague Françoise Barré-Sinoussi. Robert Gallo was excluded. The scientific community was stunned. Many believed Gallo deserved equal credit. Even Montagnier said in interviews that Gallo should have shared the prize. The Nobel Committee's decision remains controversial. What's clear is that ego, nationalism, and politics can infect even the most important scientific discoveries. But while scientists argued about credit, patients just wanted treatments that worked. As scientists studied HIV more closely, they discovered something troubling. The virus wasn't just one thing. HIV-1, the strain responsible for the global pandemic, had multiple subtypes, A, B, C, D, and several others. Even within a single infected person, HIV mutates rapidly. Reverse transcriptase, the enzyme HIV uses to copy itself, is sloppy, making errors constantly. This creates viral diversity. That diversity became a huge problem for treatment. Remember AZT? It worked by blocking reverse transcriptase. But HIV would mutate, changing the shape of reverse transcriptase just enough that AZT couldn't bind to it anymore. Resistance. Patients on AZT monotherapy, using just one drug, would improve for 6 to 12 months, then decline again as resistant virus took over. Doctors could test for resistance mutations, but the implications were grim. Every drug they developed, HIV could eventually evolve to escape. It became clear that to beat HIV, you couldn't just attack it with one drug. You needed a combination, a cocktail that would hit the virus from multiple angles simultaneously. By the mid-1990s, the AIDS epidemic had killed over 300,000 Americans. Worldwide, the death toll exceeded 1 million. AZT had proven that HIV could be slowed, but not stopped. Buyers' clubs had shown that patients wouldn't wait for bureaucracy. And denialism had proven that misinformation could be as deadly as the virus itself. But in research labs around the world, a new generation of drugs was being developed. Not just one or two, but entire classes of medications attacking HIV in different ways. The combination therapy revolution was about to change everything.